Hey guys, Mr. Shaw back again. We're going to pick up back where we left off, talking about the Supreme Court and the judicial branch. So let's go ahead and let's get right to it. So the Supreme Court has jurisdiction under two cases. First case is they do have original jurisdiction in certain areas. For example, if a case, so again, remember, original jurisdiction is the power to hear a case for the first time. That is going to, they will hear a case for the first time if it involves diplomats from foreign countries, and then usually, and again, like I said, the very special case about like anything that happens on like in the seas, any like particular crimes that happen there. But again, it's much rarer nowadays. Also, any disputes between states, the Supreme Court will hear those cases first. Again, they have original jurisdiction there. Otherwise, they have what's known as appellate jurisdiction, which we talked about in the last video. Again, that is the power of a higher court to review the decision of lower courts. So again, that is, and then that goes for all, like both of the lower levels, both the district level and the appellate level. The Supreme Court can review both of those, but you have to go through both. You have to have a district level trial, then an appellate appeal, and then it would have to go to the Supreme Court. You can, if the appeals court tells you that you can't, again, like they turn you down, they say that you still lose your case, then you can appeal to the Supreme Court, and if they decide to hear your case, then you can, like, then your case continues. But if they vote you down, they say that you also lose your case, then you're done. There's nothing else you can do after that once the Supreme Court has spoken. Again, there is, as I told you on the last video, there's 8 associate justices led by a chief justice. Again, there's one missing right now because Judge Antonin Scalia passed away last February. Their main duty is to hear and rule on cases. They choose from thousands each year. I think about 8,000 cases are sent to are appealed to the Supreme Court every year, and they actually only end up hearing about 80 cases a year. Again, they are only going to hear a very specific number that deal with, federal laws or constitution issues, and anything that might violate the rights of citizens, but via laws that have been written in either state or federal legislatures. So for the judicial appointments, okay, we talked about how justices are appointed by the president with the consent of the Senate. 20% or about 20% are rejected immediately and are not acted upon by the Senate. So that means that about 80% usually will go through the process and get confirmed by the Senate. And again, this is all justices. So like I said, there's 94 different district courts or federal district courts, and all of those are appointed by the president. So then from there, if you're a federal judge, you can move up into and become, if you're a federal district judge, you can move up to an appellate court for the appeals court, and then eventually maybe get to the Supreme Court if you'd like to as well. Federal justices are appointed, they have a lifetime appointment with good behavior. They will usually leave office. Again, the reasons why they leave office anyway are going to be because they retire, they pass away, or they are removed through impeachment. Again, just like anybody else, if a judge does something that is illegal, they are not above the law. They can be impeached, and once they are impeached, they would be held to the full extent of the law, or they would be, tried or prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, just like anybody else. All right, so the nomination process is going to be a very lengthy one, and it can definitely be a lengthy one if you are in the case of this guy right here. This is Merrick Garland. He was the selection of President Obama, and he was put forth way back in February or March of last year, and he's been waiting, almost a year now to get heard by the Senate, or to get vetted by the Senate, and he never will. He won't be able to become a judge unless the new president, Donald Trump, puts him forth, which he probably will not. But anyway, the president is going to receive suggestions from a number of people in Congress. Again, you're looking for people who are going to be good for both sides. Somebody like in the case of Merrick Garland, he appealed to both Democrats and Republicans. Okay, there were people that, like, not a single person whether Democratic or Republican had a bad thing to say about him. The only bad thing that people said was that, or well, I say bad thing, is that Obama was the one that had suggested him. So that's really, the only bad thing that he had going for him. And another thing that is interesting in this case that's happening now is that we have this thing called senatorial courtesy, and this is a custom whereby presidential appointees are confirmed only if there is no objection to them by the senators from the appointee's state. And again, that is kind of what has happened in this case, but in order to be appointed, you can't have any, you have to be actually vetted by the Senate. In the word vetted, it just means they are going to ask you questions. They are going to make sure that you are going to be a good candidate to be a Supreme Court justice. Because again, this is the highest judicial office in the land. These guys have to be above the law. And again, so they want to make sure that they're not going to put somebody in there that is going to, want to change a bunch of things, overturn a bunch of old decisions. Again, they want to have somebody who's going to have a level head and is going to want to keep the law as consistent as possible. So the last part of this is known as partisanship, and partisanship means that the president has very tough choices when they are trying to when they're making these Supreme Court selections, and really just the federal judge selections in general, because when they select these judges serve for life. So even though the president can only serve a maximum of 2 terms, so 8 years, they can appoint any number of federal judges and hopefully a few Supreme Court judges, so that is going to solidify their legacy. So, for example, Obama is a liberal, and he is going to appoint liberal judges. So even though he was only in office for 8 years, his liberal legacy is going to live on as long as the judges he appoints are still alive and still working, at their appointed positions. So that's kind of what I mean by partisanship. Again, they are trying to solidify their legacy. They're trying to leave behind their mark. And again, that's an easy way for the president to do that. So the Supreme Court, again, they select justices for that, like I said, in the same way. Again, the president appoints them with approval of the Senate. Every Supreme Court justice so far has been a lawyer, although in the Constitution there is nothing that says that there is a legal requirement to be a lawyer. There's nothing about that at all. There's not been any law about that. But if you think about it, the lawyers are going to have the best understanding of the law. So they would be, and mostly lawyers will become judges, and then judges will become Supreme Court justices. So that is kind of the background there. Again, as I said, the president, they are going to choose someone that agrees with their ideas. They are going to support their ideas, and they are going to want to further that legacy. So, for example, Obama has appointed 2 people to the Supreme Court, Kagan and then Sotomayor. So those 2 justices are going to continue his legacy, and take Obamacare, for example. Those 2 justices are probably going to agree with Obamacare and what Obama has set forth in his health care plan. He wouldn't want to approve a justice for the Supreme Court without making sure that they were going to agree with his ideas. Again, he doesn't want his ideas to get repealed as soon as he leaves office, even though that is what it looks like the Republicans are going to try to do. These 2 people I have here, again, this is Thurgood Marshall up at the top one, and then Sandra Day O'Connor. These were the first, again, Thurgood Marshall was the first African-American Supreme Court justice. Sandra Day O'Connor was the first female Supreme Court justice. Again, Thurgood Marshall, his appointment was done, I believe, in the 50s. I have it later, the exact year later. Sandra Day O'Connor was appointed by Reagan in the 1980s. Okay, so the powers of the court. The first one and the most important one, you guys already know. It's judicial review. Okay, so judicial review is what it means, and your definition is right here. Put a star by it. Just make sure you guys know what that means. Is that the court can review any federal, state, or local law or action to see if it is constitutional. There is nothing about judicial review in the Constitution. Okay, this was created because of a Supreme Court case known as Marbury versus Madison. Okay, we'll talk about that more in a second. We've already kind of talked about that a little bit, but I want to get a little bit more in depth with it. So again, the judicial review also gives the Supreme Court the power to nullify the law or the action if it is unconstitutional. And again, this is going to be it's kind of given by the Judiciary Act of 1789, but that is it actually kind of takes place in Marbury versus Madison. So that's the first case that it really appears in. So let's talk about that. John Marshall was the first Supreme Court justice, and in Marbury versus Madison, he sets forth three principles of judicial review. So the first one is that the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Second is that if there is a conflict between the Constitution and any other law, the Constitution rules. And third, if the judicial branch has a duty to uphold the Constitution. Thus, it must be able to determine when a law conflicts with the Constitution. Okay, I'm going to blow this up in a second. Give me 1 second. Okay, so here's a quick cartoon that I found that is going to kind of walk you through it. Again, this is very generalized, but again, this is just designed to help you guys remember what happened when Marbury versus Madison. So, March 3rd, 1801, that is the last day that John Adams is president. He is going to spend his last day in office signing commissions to giving jobs to people in his party. Okay, next day, Jefferson is inaugurated. Okay, and he has, again, John Adams has already signed all this. Thomas Jefferson is of a different party. Okay, so he does not want to deliver any of these commissions. That means that these people basically won't get the jobs, and he wants to give those jobs to people of his own party. Okay, so this guy named William Marbury is supposed to be a justice of the peace. He was given this by Adams, and he sues James Madison for not delivering the commission. Okay, he appeals to the Supreme Court, and he says, and again it says here, under the Judiciary Act of 1789, Madison is required to hand me that commission. I shall sue Madison. The Supreme Court will make sure I get my commission. Okay, then here we have it in the Supreme Court. We have John Marshall. Okay, and again they're arguing this. Here's the argument. It says, Madison says, I will not give Marbury his commission. What President Adams did was outrageous. And then Marbury said, Madison must give me the commission. Under the Judicial Act of 1789, all federal officials must do their jobs. Okay, and then here's Marshall's thinking. It says, Madison did act illegally, but if I order him to give Marbury his commission, he will ignore it, for he has no risk of being impeached by the Democratic Republican legislature. That's the party that had just taken power. Excuse us, we have a technical delay here. Okay, we're done. Okay, anyway, so again, he has no fear of being impeached, so he comes up with a new plan. He says, if I give the case to Marbury, the power and authority of the Supreme Court will lessen when Madison does not obey orders, so he doesn't want that to happen. I also want to establish the Supreme Court as the final judge in evaluating the Constitution, which is impossible unless the judicial branch has power and authority among the people. So at this point, the Supreme Court is the weakest of the three branches. So what he does is, here's what he decides. He says, Mr. Marbury, Mr. Madison is not required to give you your commission. Some portions of the Judiciary Act of 1789 are unconstitutional because they give unconstitutional powers to the Supreme Court. Therefore, Mr. Madison does not have to give you the commission. So he is using an unconstitutional power that was given to him in the Judiciary Act of 1789 to outlaw or to declare another act of someone unconstitutional. Okay, or to declare another act constitutional, rather. He says he doesn't have to give it to you because the law, he's saying the law that gave me power is unconstitutional. Okay, so basically, again, at this point, he is giving himself more power. He's giving the Supreme Court more power. It doesn't really say that, before, had he not ever declared any law or action unconstitutional, the Supreme Court might never have done that, and they would have been the weakest branch. Okay, but that's what he's doing. It says here, Marshall is using an unconstitutional power to declare another power unconstitutional. He's creating this power of judicial review. okay, which is the power for the Supreme Court to declare laws unconstitutional. Anyway, that's the main thing you need to remember with Marbury versus Madison. I just wanted to kind of give you a rundown for that. Okay, guys, this has been about 15 minutes. I'm going to stop it here. We'll finish the rest in the next video. See you next time. Thanks for watching.